I'm Guido Hoffmann, the product manager for Hoops Communicator, and in the next 15 minutes I give you a tour of the Hoops Communicator package and show you how to run and compile the samples included on the media. I'm assuming that you have reviewed the Hoops Communicator white paper or technical overview video in order to gain some familiarity with the capabilities and architecture of the product.
Let's start with downloading and installing the package. Navigate to developer.techsoft3d.com/communicator. There you find the latest version of the software for Windows and Linux, as well as online documentation and release notes. For access to the package and the documentation and terms of a trial license, please contact TechSoft3D. After logging in with your username and password, download and unzip the package to a convenient location. For this video, we are focusing on the Windows package, but the general structure functionality is almost identical for Linux as well. After you unzip the package, let's have a quick tour of the content. There are 5 folders. We will talk about each of these in more detail later, but just as a quick summary. Authoring, Server, and WebViewer each contain all the relevant files for development and to run the 3 major components of Hoops Communicator. Then we have the documentation, which we'll talk about later, and finally the Quick Start folder, which contains samples which serve as an easy demo and introduction to Hoops Communicator and let you see the product in action. Let's take a closer look at the documentation. It all starts with a technical overview, which gives you a bird's eye view of the product and its general architecture. Definitely a good place to get started if you want to delve a little deeper into the design of Hoops Communicator and how its components work together. The release notes, obviously very important, give you a quick overview of the major new features and bug fixes for the current and previous releases. And we have the search capability that helps you, or at least should help you, quickly find what you're looking for. Other than that, the documentation is broken down into 3 chapters, corresponding to the 3 major components of Communicator: the authoring, the web viewer, and the server. For each of those components, there are reference manuals, programming guides, and a getting started page. A good place to get started though with the product is a quick start in the overview. Let's look at the Quick Start folder next, which is an easy way to see Hoops Communicator in action. And I'll start with a brief overview of the directory and what's in there. All models in the package that are ready for viewing by the server, and we talk about the server in a second, go into the content model data directory. Other than that, we have various scripts and assets folders for the CSS, images, and so on that are more of internal use. We have a batch file for easy cut conversion, which we talk about later. But to get you started, you need to run the server first. And this is what the start server batch file is doing for you. Basically, it sets up a file and streaming server on your machine, which is required to run the samples locally. Let's look at the index.html page, which contains all the viewer samples. In there you see a collection of sample models, really showcasing the flexibility of Hoops Communicator and dealing with very different types of data, from MCAD, BIM, drawings, to point clouds, to models with textures, and so on. All these models can be viewed in different loading modes. Client-side rendering, or the rendering happens in the browser, in the client browser in WebGL. Server-side rendering, where only images are sent down to the client. And we also have the SES mode. This is just a file that gets sent down to the client and no server connection is required. It's important to note that the viewer is really only a reference application for a very extensive API that allows you to write really any type of engineering application on top of it. From simple UI changes to writing very extensive new operators, there's very few limitations to what you can do to modify the behavior of the viewer. Another important aspect of that index page are the developer examples. These are little bite-sized chunks of code that demonstrate various viewer features. They're really a great resource for jumping into your own development and start experimenting with the product and the API. So I encourage you to just try them out and yeah, just do a little bit of experimenting. The other part of the getting started is a drag and drop offering via convertfile.bat. Just drag a file supported by Exchange on it, and it will automatically be converted, as you can see here, and then pop up a new browser window and view the file right then and there. To view these files later, you just click on convertfiles.bat, which will show a list of all the converted models for you. We will talk more about Converter in a second. Now that we've finished looking at the quick start, let's dig into more detail on each of the three Hoops Communicator components. Let's start with the offering. You can offer data into Hoops Communicator in two ways. One is by converting models via the converter component, which is available as a standalone executable and as a library. The other is via lib stream cache offering, which we'll get to later. Let's look at converter. In the converter folder, the binary folder contains the converter executable as well as all the relevant libraries and additional files needed to run converter for different compiler versions. The examples folder contains sample projects for the library version of converter as well as batch files that demonstrates a few typical conversion scenarios. Looking at the sample batch file in the editor, you will see that it contains simple cut conversions to our internal stream cache format without special parameters as well as more complex conversions to various other formats. It also kicks off a bulk conversion via another XML file. All the various command line options are described in the documentation in the converter command line option section. Let's run the sample batch file and see what it does. You will see a command window pop up as it goes through all the different conversions, which will take a few minutes to finish. All the resulting files will be in the output directory. This includes the stream cache models for our viewer, but also files that can be viewed directly, like PNGs. Or PDF files. To view the streamcast models, simply copy the files you want to view into the quickstart content directory we mentioned earlier. At that point, simply open the index page, load any of the sample models, and replace the name in the URL. You can also author directly from your application by using libsc. This is a C++ library for direct authoring of stream cache content, but there are also Java bindings available. The examples folder contains a Visual Studio project and makefiles with various authoring samples. As usual, you will find a lot more information about this topic in the documentation. Now let's look at the web viewer. The source directory of that folder contains all the relevant files to deploy a Hoops Communicator-based application in the browser with its standard UI. There's also an HWF example in there, which we ignore for now. The examples folder contains the samples that I have already quickly mentioned previously when we talked about the quick start index page. Those make great starting points for your first experiments with Communicator. For this example, we will load the minimal sample into an editor and quickly make a slight modification to it by changing the render mode after loading. To view it, just head back to the index page and click on the sample you have modified. Finally, there is the server component of Hoops Communicator, which I will only touch on briefly here. This is the application you will deploy on your own server infrastructure to manage the Hoops Communicator viewing sessions. It comes with integration samples with integrations with C#, Java, and JavaScript, but it's designed to be easily integrated into almost any server environment. When deploying, you can use the Settings Builder script, which helps with configuring the Hoops Communicator server. We talk a little more about this next when we discuss deploying Hoops Communicator in a real-world environment as part of your web application.
The documentation discusses the main deployment scenarios of Communicator. Our server tools are well suited for deployment in cloud-based environments such as AWS or Azure. And when you get to a point where you need to evaluate deployment options, this is where you find guidelines. At that point, it might also make sense to connect with our technical team for assistance.
As briefly mentioned before, the Settings Builder script is an easy way to get Hoops Communicator quickly deployed on AWS or any other server environment. Just click on the Settings Builder batch file to run the script. As you can see, it allows you to configure the deployment mode for the Hoops Communicator server, as well as various machine-specific settings like IP address, SSL certificate, the number of simultaneous viewing sessions, model directory, and many other things. That brings us to the end of this Getting Started video. I hope you found this useful and that it helps with kickstarting your development with Hoops Communicator. For more information, please contact your consulting engineer or visit developer.techsoft3d.com. Thank you.